Welcome. Grab your Bible, your notebook, and let's dig into this. We're going to tackle some pretty heavy stuff here, connecting dots that most people don't even see. We're going to look at the pyramids, the Bible, a peculiar hypothesis, and what might have happened in the past, all through a lens that many might find, well, let's just say, unconventional. The pyramids, a monument to the Lord? Now, you've probably heard people say the pyramids are mentioned in the Bible. They'll point to things like Genesis and the Israelites in Egypt. But what about the Great Pyramid itself? Is it really in the Bible? There's a fascinating passage in Isaiah chapter 19 verses 19 to 20. In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. A lot of people believe this is a direct reference to the Great Pyramid of Giza. An altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and a monument to the Lord at its border. Now, where is Giza? It's right on the border of Lower and Upper Egypt. And what's the pyramid? A massive, undeniable monument. Is it a coincidence? I don't think so. Now, let's bring in Ezekiel. You mentioned a prophecy. What's Ezekiel all about? He's a prophet who sees incredible things, visions of God's glory and a future temple. He's talking about a time when all will be revealed. Some people, especially in the world of pyramidology, see these structures not as tombs for pharaohs, but as something else entirely, prophetic tools, built by someone with a divine blueprint. They suggest the measurements and passages of the Great Pyramid are a Bible in stone, a chronicle of God's plan for humanity. It's an idea that's been around for a while, and while it's not mainstream, it's worth considering. Could these ancient structures be witnesses to God's plan, just as Isaiah said? The phantom time hypothesis and the millennium. Now, let's shift gears and get into something that'll really make you think. The phantom time hypothesis. This is a wild one, but bear with me. A German historian, Heribert Illig, proposed that the years 614 to 911 AD never happened. That's right. About 300 years of history, he argues, were fabricated. They were added to the calendar by powerful figures, like the Pope and Holy Roman Emperor, to put them in the year 800, the year of Charlemagne's coronation, to line up with the year 300 of the Christian era. This theory suggests that the Dark Ages weren't just dark because we lack records, but because they simply didn't exist. Now, why does this matter to us? Well, if we take 300 years out of the calendar, it completely changes our timeline. It shifts everything forward. A lot of prophecy students believe that the 1,000 years of Revelation, the binding of Satan, is a symbolic period. But what if it was literal? What if it happened and we missed it? Let's look at Revelation chapter 20 verses 7 to 10. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. In the last days, the nations of the earth would be led to war against God's people. The standard Christian timeline places the 1,000 years of peace after the return of Christ, and the battle of Gog and Magog as a future event. But what if we've already had the millennium? If you subtract about 1,000 years from our current date, you get a period around the first millennium AD. If you take out those 300 years from the phantom time hypothesis, things get even more interesting. It places the end of a 1,000-year period around the 11th century. What happened around 1070 AD? A lot of things were happening in Europe. There were shifts in power, the Crusades were on the horizon, and there was a great schism in the church. Was this the release of Satan? It's a question worth pondering. The changing of the Sabbath and book burnings. Now, let's tie this all together. What happened after the first millennium? We see a major shift in the church. The early church observed the Sabbath on Saturday, just as the Jews did. It was a commandment given by God. However, over time, the church, particularly the Roman Church, moved the day of rest to Sunday. This wasn't a small change, it was a major theological shift. The early church fathers talked about it. It was a move to distance themselves from the Jews, and to commemorate the day of Christ's resurrection. But was it God's plan? Or was it a man-made change? Then you have the book burnings. Throughout history, especially in the Middle Ages, there were systematic attempts to destroy knowledge. Heretical texts, books from different religions, even scientific works, were all put to the torch. This wasn't just about suppressing ideas, it was about controlling the narrative, ensuring that only approved information was available. When you have a massive shift in time, and a fabricated history, what do you need to do? You need to destroy the evidence that contradicts your new reality. The book burnings were a part of that. They were a way of cementing a new timeline, a new theology, and a new way of life. So, when we look at the pyramids, we see a monument that might be more than it seems. When we consider the phantom time hypothesis, we see that our entire historical framework could be off by centuries. And when we look at the changing of the Sabbath and the book burnings, we see the very real evidence of a power at work, a power that sought to control not just the present, but the past as well. It's a deep rabbit hole, but it's one we must explore if we want to truly understand the times we're living in. Keep looking up, the signs are all around us. This isn't just about connecting a few dots, it's about re-examining the entire timeline of prophecy, as if the promises weren't just symbolic, but were fulfilled in a literal, physical way. So let's get into it, staying with this narrative. The promises kept, 70 AD and the physical kingdom. Now, most people in their dispensational theology will tell you that the promises to Israel, the restoration, the kingdom, the reign of the Messiah, are all future events. They'll say that 70 AD was just the destruction of the temple, a judgment on a rebellious people. But what if it was something else entirely? What if, in a grand, literal, physical way, it was a fulfillment of the promises? Let's consider this. 70 AD wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The Roman armies, led by Titus, came in and destroyed the temple, yes. But in this narrative, it wasn't just a physical destruction. It was the end of the Old Covenant age, and the immediate, physical transition into the new one. The promises of a kingdom on earth, the reign of a Messiah, weren't postponed for some future day. They were granted. The Apostle John, in Revelation, talks about a 1,000-year kingdom, where the saints reign with Christ. What if this wasn't some future spiritual reality, but a literal, physical kingdom that began in 70 AD? Imagine the world at that time. Chaos, destruction, and then, a literal, physical kingdom on earth, ushered in by the return of Christ. The saints, the believers who had been promised a reward, they were given authority. Mansions and ruling over many. You hear Jesus talking about preparing mansions for his followers. John chapter 14 verse 2. We've always interpreted this as a future, heavenly reward. But what if it was literal, and on earth? In this narrative, after 70 AD, the faithful were given physical homes, not just spiritual blessings. They were granted land, property, and authority in this new, literal kingdom. The mansions were physical, real-world homes. And what about ruling over many? Jesus said to his disciples that they would sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Matthew chapter 19 verse 28. And he told the parable of the talents, where the faithful servant was given authority over 10 cities. What if this was all fulfilled literally? In this kingdom that began in 70 AD, the faithful believers were literally given dominion. They became rulers, administrators, and governors over the nations. The world was literally reordered according to a divine plan. It was a new world order, not a satanic one, but a God-ordained one. This new kingdom was one of peace, prosperity, and literal rule by the saints. This was the golden age, the millennium, that prophecy talks about. It wasn't a spiritual state, it was a physical reality on earth. The world was literally transformed into a kingdom of God. This would explain a lot of the history we've lost, or what's been rewritten. The monument to the Lord at Giza. Now, let's tie this back to the pyramids. We talked about Isaiah chapter 19 verses 19 to 20, a monument to the Lord at its border. In the last narrative, we explored the idea that the Great Pyramid was a prophetic Bible in stone. But in this one, let's consider something else. What if it was built during this 1,000-year kingdom, as a monument to this kingdom? Imagine this. The Messiah has returned, the saints are ruling, and the world is being physically transformed. There's a need for a central place of worship, a monument to the Lord that stands as a testament to this new age. Instead of just a metaphorical monument, what if a literal one was built? The Great Pyramid, with its precise dimensions and celestial alignments, would be the perfect structure. It wasn't built by pagan pharaohs in this timeline. It was built by the faithful, under the guidance of the Messiah, as a literal witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. This would also help explain the phantom time. If this literal kingdom existed for 1,000 years, from roughly 70 AD to 1070 AD, then the historical record would be full of this glorious period. But what if that record was systematically destroyed or rewritten after 1070 AD? The end of the millennium would be marked by the releasing of Satan, as we discussed before. This would lead to a period of chaos and deception, where the record of this literal kingdom was purged. The book burnings, the changing of the Sabbath, the rewriting of history, it all makes sense in this context. It's not just a suppression of ideas, it's the systematic deletion of an entire golden age from human memory. The pyramids stand today as a silent, physical witness to a time that has been forgotten, a kingdom that was and is no more. It's all a conspiracy, a massive cover-up, and you and I are here to figure it out. We're going to dive even deeper into this. Grab your King James Bibles, because we're going to stay true to the Word as we connect these incredible dots. We're going to talk about 33 AD, a time most people think was just the crucifixion, but in this narrative, it was the beginning of the end. We'll bring in some Roman historians and some modern-day investigators to show you that what we've been taught is just a cover-up. 33 AD. The promises kept and the atonement. Most of the world sees the crucifixion as the end of a life, a tragic sacrifice. But the KJV tells us it's the fulfillment of prophecy. John chapter 19 verse 30 says, "It is finished." This wasn't just about Jesus' life ending. It was about the promises being fulfilled. The atonement was complete. The veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, Matthew chapter 27 verse 51, signifying that access to God was no longer restricted. This was a literal, physical fulfillment of the new covenant. The Revelation period, the time of the great revealing, didn't begin in John's vision on Patmos in 95 AD. It began with the atonement in 33 AD. The book of Revelation is a detailed account of the events that followed the cross, not something to be fulfilled in the distant future. It's a history book, not a prophecy book. Accounts from Roman historians. Now, let's bring in some of the outside world, some secular evidence. We're talking about Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and Flavius Josephus. They're not exactly believers, but their writings provide a strange validation. Tacitus, in his Annals, describes the Neronian persecution of Christians in Rome. He talks about a most mischievous superstition that originated in Judea and was led by Christus, who was executed by Procurator Pontius Pilatus. He even mentions the darkness that covered the land at the time of the crucifixion, which he dismisses as a natural phenomenon. But we know better. This is an independent account of the atonement and the spread of the new movement. Cassius Dio, in his Roman history, also writes about the events in Judea. He speaks of strange portents, a great earthquake, and a thick darkness that spread over the land. He couldn't explain it, but we can. This was a direct result of the atonement, a sign from God. Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian, in his Antiquities of the Jews, mentions Jesus and his followers. He calls him a wise man who performed surprising deeds. He even corroborates the crucifixion under Pilate. Josephus also details the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, which, in our narrative, was the physical manifestation of the end of the Old Covenant and the beginning of the new era. These accounts, while seemingly dismissive, are a testament to the reality of the events of 33 AD. The Romans themselves couldn't deny the strange occurrences that happened after the atonement. Ron Wyatt, the Ark of the Covenant, and Project Sunstreak. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the modern-day evidence. We're going to talk about Ron Wyatt, a man who claimed to have found the Ark of the Covenant. Wyatt said that he found the Ark buried in a cave beneath the crucifixion site. He also claimed to have found the very crack in the rock caused by the earthquake at the time of the crucifixion, a crack that extended down into the cave where the Ark was located. According to Wyatt, when Christ's side was pierced, the blood and water ran down the cross, down the crack in the rock, and landed directly on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. This was the final, physical, and ultimate act of atonement. The blood of the Lamb of God literally atoned for the sins of the world by landing on the mercy seat of the earthly tabernacle. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the Levitical law. It was an atonement that was complete and literal. This leads us to a fascinating concept, Project Sunstreak. This is a project, allegedly by the U.S. government, to use psychics to locate biblical artifacts. One of the psychics, a man named Pat Price, claimed to have remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant and corroborated Wyatt's claims about its location and what was inside. This is not just some fringe theory. This is the government, using their own methods, verifying a major biblical find. It's all part of the grand cover-up. They know it's there. They just don't want the public to know. The Adam and Eve story and mathematical probabilities. Finally, let's bring in Chan Thomas's The Adam and Eve Story. This is a declassified CIA document that talks about a recurring cataclysmic event on Earth, a pole shift. Thomas says these events happen every few thousand years and wipe the slate clean, leading to a new Adam and Eve story. Now, why is this important? It provides a framework for the lost history we've been talking about. The 1,000-year kingdom from 70 AD to 1070 AD, the changing of the Sabbath, the book burnings, it all could have been a part of a catastrophic event and the subsequent rewriting of history by those who survived. Now, let's look at the numbers. The mathematical probability of all these things happening by chance is virtually zero. Consider the probability of a man being crucified and his blood falling onto a specific spot. An earthquake happening at that exact moment, creating a crack that leads to a cave. The Ark of the Covenant being hidden in that exact cave for thousands of years. That man's blood landing directly on the mercy seat of the Ark. The probability of this, combined with the historical accounts and the remote viewing evidence, is staggering. It's a mathematical certainty that this was not a coincidence. This was by design. It's a grand conspiracy to hide the truth, but the numbers don't lie. They point to a God who is in control, a God who has a plan, and a God who fulfilled his promises in a way that is so literal, so physical, that it defies all human understanding. This narrative, drawing from various sources including the Adam and Eve story, pyramidology, and the phantom time hypothesis, presents a radical reinterpretation of biblical prophecy and world history. It posits that major prophetic events, traditionally viewed as future occurrences, have already happened, and that our current historical understanding is a fabrication designed to conceal these past events. 33 AD, the beginning of the end. According to this view, the crucifixion in 33 AD wasn't just a spiritual event, it was the starting gun for a precise prophetic timeline. The atonement was not just spiritual but also literal, as Christ's blood, according to the claims of Ron Wyatt, flowed through a crack in the rock to the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, physically completing the ultimate sacrifice. This event marks the beginning of the Revelation period and the countdown to a literal, physical kingdom. The mathematical probability of the fulfillment of Daniel's 70 weeks is presented as a staggering number, suggesting that the timing of the Messiah's death was divinely preordained and not a random occurrence. 40 AD, the rapture and the inexplicable silence. 7 years after the atonement, in 40 AD, the rapture is believed to have occurred. This event, rather than being a future promise, is interpreted as a past reality where the righteous were removed from the earth. The inexplicable silence that followed marks the beginning of a period of divine judgment on a world left behind. 66 to 67 AD, the omens of a groaning planet. In the years leading up to 70 AD, the world experienced a series of unsettling omens, as documented by historians like Titus Flavius Josephus and Cassius Dio. These accounts of spectral armies, comets, and blood-like substances are viewed not as mere superstitions but as the earth groaning in anticipation of a massive cataclysm. This period is linked to the declassified Chan Thomas document, The Adam and Eve Story, which describes a periodic planetary pole shift as the cause of such global turmoil. 70 AD, the cataclysm and the return of the king. This interpretation holds that 70 AD was not just the destruction of Jerusalem but a worldwide cataclysm caused by a planetary pole shift. This event, referred to as a mud flood, buried civilizations and instantly flash-froze life, as evidenced by geological anomalies like fish fossils on mountaintops and petrified remains. After this global cleansing, Christ is believed to have returned to a desolate earth to begin his 1,000-year literal kingdom. 70 AD to 1070 AD, the lost millennium. This 1,000-year period is the core of this narrative. It's the lost millennium, in which Christ and the resurrected saints reigned physically on earth. During this time, they built the great monuments that still puzzle historians today, such as the Giza pyramids, the Taj Mahal, and the statues of Easter Island. These structures are viewed as physical monuments to a divine kingdom. The reason this era is missing from our historical records is attributed to the phantom time hypothesis, which proposes that these centuries were deliberately fabricated or erased by later generations. 1070 AD present, the Age of Lies. At the close of the 1,000-year kingdom, the saints ascended, and the second resurrection brought back the wicked, who were given mortal bodies. They awoke to a perfect, divine world, which they could not comprehend. Unable to coexist with the evidence of a divine reign, they embarked on a colossal project of deception to rewrite history. They fabricated centuries of events, filling the gap of the lost millennium with a false history, including the Dark Ages. This narrative concludes that our modern timeline is a carefully constructed illusion designed to hide the truth of a world once ruled by Christ himself.